Hi there, welcome to a new series of videos we're going to be doing. These are going to be a little different from the how-to videos I've done before, and it's actually going to be more like a visual rose blog, spending a year with me in my garden and maybe doing some other rose stuff with me. And the idea came about because someone wrote me recently and said they wanted to come see my garden. They just assumed it was going to be absolutely beautiful, and I thought to myself, you know, it really isn't right now. I wrote the book last year, I got tied up with that, I broke my finger over the winter, couldn't do anything, behind in my weeding, behind in my pruning, and I'm sure that all sounds familiar to you guys as well. And everybody seems that, you know, I write a book and I'm supposed to know about roses, therefore I have a beautiful garden. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to show you everything I've got, warts and all. So we'll spend a year in the garden doing some chores, you'll learn some tips, do some maintenance. We're going to look at some new roses, that's going to be a lot of fun, evaluate them together. We're going to look at roses that haven't even been released yet, and I want your feedback to see which ones do you like, maybe which ones you'd like to see released. We'll do a little traveling and just whatever other rose things that I can normally do. But most of the time we'll spend right here in my garden. So I hope you enjoy this series. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll try to do a new one about every couple weeks or so. So first of all, it's time to meet my garden. This is my main rose bed. It's about 15, 20 years old by this point. It was actually a vegetable garden before we even bought the place. And as you can see, it's now been pruned pretty much completely. It's also been weeded, and it's now awaiting mulch. That's the next step. And what's interesting, I want to draw your attention to one bush in particular. This is Flamenco rosita, part of the Biltmore Garden Rose Collection. This plant's about 8 years old. It's an own root plant. And I like to note that it's leafing out a lot sooner than some of the other roses. I want you to pay attention to that, because if you look over here and we continue on the rest of the bed, some of these are barely leafed out. What that goes to show you is that roses wake up from winter at different times. So if some of your roses are leafing out and some of them haven't leafed out yet, don't worry about it. They'll all do it at their own pace. This is a rose bed that's now about 2 years old. It consists of nothing but Delbard roses. Some of them are coming along nicely, some of them are not so well as others, but they're only about 2 years old, so I'm not real concerned at the moment. But we'll get into this one in just a little bit because there's some pruning left to do, as you can see, and we'll talk about what I'm doing and why. This is a second Delbard bed, even though I will admit it now has roses other than just Delbard in it. As you can see, this is totally unpruned, still needs to be weeded, and it still needs a lot of work done on this. But this is one of the ones I'm going to tackle next. Those big roses in the back are actually Pappy Delbard. They're large climbers. And I had to plant them here because I needed a space to keep them where I could let them grow and use them for cuttings and for budwood and things like that. You've seen fences in some of these shots. However, on the other side of those fences are lots of horses. And the problem with that is horses eat roses. So hence the Pappy Delbards are standing on their own. This is the shack garden, is what we call it at least. You may recognize this from some of the other videos. That arbor in front of you is the one that starred in how to cover an arbor with roses. I am way behind on this bed this year. Everything's gotten away from me. It has leafed out far more than I was expecting. And that brings you to something. What do you do when the roses have leafed out and you haven't pruned yet? Well, I just wrote about that in my Fine Gardening blog, so you can go check it out there. But basically, in a nutshell, what I want you to do is don't sweat it. I probably will give this a little bit of a haircut, and I might likely let this go through the spring flush, then come and prune it afterward. But I'll make my decision fairly shortly, but you'll have a pretty good idea as we go on to see what I've done. But the thing is, if you can't get to your pruning, don't worry about it. This is what's classically known as a mistake. That's a compassion rose to the right of what is now a rather large Camellia japonica. This rose is probably going to have to get moved this year. I'm not 100% certain where it's going to go, but I'm definitely going to have to move it. But that's something I won't really do until a year from now, probably like in February of 2014 when it's dormant. This is Dennis. Dennis, say hello to everybody. Dennis is chief mouser and also very, very good at vole patrol. And he flirts. Best part of a new year in any single rose garden is trying out and planting new roses. And I've planted a bunch of new ones, and we're going to have a look at them during the year and see how they do and evaluate them together. This right here is what's called Pink Supreme. It's part of the Flower Carpet series. It's the next generation of Flower Carpet series. I've also got Scarlet Carpet and Amber Carpet here as well. So we'll watch these three series from Teslar and see how they do during the season. I've also got some new roses from Star Rose's Conard Pile, the folks who did Knockout. This is a really neat one that I'm looking forward to seeing how it does. It's called Mother of Pearl. It's new to me, I'm not familiar with it, so this is one of the roses as well that we'll be watching throughout the year. This is another new one from Star Rose's Conard Pile. This is Francis Mayland, M-E-I-L-L-A-N-D. I've been hearing incredible things about this rose. Very fragrant, very disease resistant. I'm really excited to watch this one, so I think we're going to have a lot of fun seeing how this one does together. This is a bed I'm particularly excited about, but instead of my home, these are actually at my church. These are red drift roses, also from Star Rose's Conard pile. And they're a mix of ground covers and miniature roses, is the crossbreeding to get them. And what they're going to do is spread inside this bed and give me a nice color of red. This is something else we're going to be watching as the year goes on. Florida. This is one from Mike Athy. It's an unreleased rose. Mike Athy is a New Zealand breeder. I represent him in the United States. I love the petalage on this one. It also has very nice fragrance. What's interesting is that it's been in this bald condition for about a week, but it's not balding up and rotting. I'm still waiting for it to open, but it shows no signs of falling off or being in poor condition. In fact, it's actually in excellent condition. This is going to be a fun one to see what it does over the next year. This is another unreleased Mike Athy. This is actually going to be a ground cover, as you can certainly tell by the way it's growing. I love the flowers and I love the foliage. This is very typical of Mike's roses. One of the reasons I like working with them. That dark green glossy foliage that seems impervious to disease. And I like the budding on this one too. It's going to be fun to see how this one spreads because it seems to be a true ground cover. This has been an interesting rose this year. There's about 10 of them in here, and normally they do very well, but I had an enormous amount of dieback, which you can hopefully see behind my hand here. I know it's hard to see in the bed with the leaves. The question is, what do you do? It's dead wood. You got to cut it out. So the only thing I can really do at this point is just literally cut this thing almost to the ground, get rid of it, and what I hope that's going to do is to spur some new growth. So I'm just cutting out all the dead growth. Do the same thing on this plant. I mean, it's to the point I'm not even going to have much left when I'm done with it at that point. But one of the things I did do when I planted this rose, you can see that's all dead growth right there. One of the things I did do when I planted these roses, I buried that bud union about 2 inches deep. This is one of the reasons I'm so adamant about this. Because even though it's hard to see, right here I've got a little piece of growth coming right here from underneath the ground. I've got one little cane left here. This has actually got 2 small canes coming up right here. So we're going to watch these roses after I prune them all to the ground, and let's see if they recover. Now, if they don't recover, I'm just going to be merciless. I'm going to grab a shovel, I'm going to tear them out of here. I don't have enough space in my garden to have roses that I'm going to have to dye back every year and bring back. I'll just find another variety that does better. So always don't worry about that. If a variety struggles in your garden, just get rid of it. There's always something better out there you can find. These are some roses that are still fairly young and fairly new. As you can see, there's not a lot of growth on them. They're still coming along. I'm not going to prune them much. And I'm actually even pruning late. You can see by all the foliage that's on these things. So what I'm going to do this year is just cut out the dead wood and leave them be. You're probably also seeing a lot of weeds in some of the beds I haven't pruned yet. That's because I don't really worry about weeding until after I prune. Because I've got someone who comes in and weeds. That's something that Book Royalties actually gives me the pleasure of doing. I hate weeding. And it's easier to do that kind of thing when the roses are already trimmed up and cleaned up a little bit. But that's all I'm going to do with these roses that are still young and really not showing much growth yet. Give them a light trim, dead wood, that's about it. That wraps up this pretty much first video. First week of April is where we're at right now. You've got an introduction to my garden, seen some of the new roses that we're going to be looking at together. The one bed that I was working in, I go ahead and cut the dead ones back as hard as I could. The other ones, I just cleaned them up a little bit. Next step in there, we got to weed it, then we're going to have to mulch it. Got to move on to the other beds, kind of finish my pruning. So next time we see each other, we'll get you caught up.